We are going to be taking a look back at some of our past code and award winners today, checking in on their progress, seeing what they did with that money we gave them, and generally getting some advice for you for how you can proceed in your startup. So I want to bring up our Code N15 winner under the motto, Into the Internet of Things. Please welcome Jackson Bond of relayr. Welcome, Jackson. Have a seat. We're going to have a chat. Okay. You can grab that mic. Excellent. Aren't you happy you're sitting close? It's much nicer, isn't it? Jackson, what is relayr, and how did you convince those people to give you money?
Good question. I think we got very lucky. So relayr, first of all, relayr is an industrial Internet of Things platform, or we call it middleware. It's something that sits in the Internet. And it allows data from different sources. They could be machines, they could be buildings, they could be cars, they could be trains, or train stations for that matter, to be visualized in the Internet so that the companies can then begin to learn how to use that data effectively for predicting, for example, maintenance cases or downtime in the factories and these kinds of things. We have a bunch of industrial customers.
Tell us about, give us a case study. So give us a very practical example of how this is working, because that's very general. Okay,
I can give you two fun ones. So what do you think is the most important thing for the Deutsche Bahn, the German railway? Anyone here from the German railway? I doubt it. Just don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So what's the most important thing for the German railway?
Bad English on the announcements.
No, time. Punctuality is the most important thing for the German railway. This we kind of assumed it as well, but when they came to us and they said, we have 6 cases that we want you guys to implement for us. One of them is the most important, and we couldn't have guessed that this is very important for them. It's the clocks, the train clocks. Everyone knows these round clocks that are hanging above every train station. So those clocks often stop working, and that has a direct marketing effect. When you come down the stairs and you're sitting on the platform and you look up at the clock and not even the clock works at the Deutsche Bahn. You know, what do we expect from the trains? So they said this is a marketing pain that we have, and so they want to observe and monitor the clocks, and so that's what we're helping them do. Also, in factories. So we're working with one of Germany's large bottling companies. Anyone here from Cronus? Cronus? No? So Cronus is one of the world's largest manufacturers of bottling machine equipment. Now they have very large, expensive bottling machines, and they have lots of sensors inside. These sensors, however, are not necessarily connected to the Internet, which means they don't know what's happening with all of the sensors and all of the machines around the globe with their machines. I think they have 100,000 machines around the globe. These are very large. They would fill this entire room. And so what they want to do is, for the first time, be able to start aggregating data from these different machines around the world so they can begin to model behavior and health of these machines, so they can also begin to predict problems before they happen, which means saving downtime problems. In some of their customers, bottling plants, 1 hour of downtime costs them 30,000 euros, and so they want to be able to predict before it happens. When it's going to happen. And that allows them, when they see the data in the Internet, and they can begin to run algorithms across it to define new predictive models, then that improves their business outcomes.
So
those are 2 examples.
Those are 2 good examples.
There are many more. I can go on for a long time.
Who would like another example?
Anyone else another example?
They're good. Okay. Let's continue with some questions I have. So you came here last year. You pitched the jury with your idea. They clearly liked it. What has changed for you since winning? Has anything changed?
Yes. So I think in terms of numbers, we were about 15 people. That was about a year and a half ago, was the CeBIT 2015 in March. And we had about 15 people. Now we have about 80 people. We had no Series A funding, and now we have a Series A funding from one of the world's largest VCs, most successful VCs, Kleiner Perkins. Kleiner Perkins is based in Silicon Valley. They're one of the early investors in big game-changing platforms like Google, like Amazon, and they decided that out of the 800 platforms, Internet of Things platforms that they counted, they wanted to and decided to invest in us, which makes us, of course, feel very good. Back then, we were also a bit more focused on building out our developer community. So we're an open platform, which means that any engineer or any person can connect to our platform and begin to connect their things without us. And now, since then, we've started a whole sales. We've built up our sales team, and now that has basically turned our company into an enterprise-focused company with a developer community, where 60–70% of those developers are actually engineers working at big companies. And so they're building new prototypes for their factories or for their buildings or for their companies. So those are a couple of just numbers. In terms of bookings, I think now, in terms of finance and bookings, we've probably tripled or quadrupled our bookings since last year. Yeah.
Congratulations, that's quite a year.
And I think, well, I think a lot of it was due, I have to say it, a lot of it was due to the attention and the visibility that Code-N brought us. And I think also the partners. So what's unique about Code-N, at least for us, or my perspective, is it's not just a startup event. There are a lot of startup events. It's a startup event that is very closely coupled with big companies and corporates who have a vested interest in these startups and their technology. And that builds this ecosystem. And without that ecosystem, you don't have the innovation. You don't have the startups that can then begin to grow. And now you suddenly have this dialogue between big industry, big companies, Accenture, Trump, GFT, or whoever it is, or Hewlett-Packard, and these startups, and they're getting a lot more attention that way, I think, and that wasn't like that 5 years ago, and I think part of that is due to organizations like Code-N.
It really is what we're trying to do, trying to get everyone at the same table, drink a Red Bull maybe, shout out to our sponsors, and talk about their ideas, just so that Jackson and I know, like, where are you from? Raise your hand if you're working at a big company. So we'll define big company as, like, I don't know, 500 or more employees. Big company? That's like roughly half of startup. What
about startups? Raise your hands high. I want to see the
startups.
Where are the startups?
You're a startup. Woo,
right.
Startups. Okay.
Okay, so it's about half-half.
Raise your hand if you're something else entirely.
Government. Any government? Government?
Unemployed.
Government. Good. Good. We need you. We need you to invest in localities, locations. Excellent. Good.
Okay, so maybe since so many startups raised their hand, we can close by letting you give a word of advice to the startups in the room, a general piece of advice, something you wish people would have said to you in the beginning. So what we learned on our journey, maybe just briefly, so we started out with an idea that nobody understood. We tried to pitch it, nobody understood it. We were invited to an acceleration program where we pitched it 80 times, nobody understood it. And then for some reason, someone said, the team is interesting, so they brought us into an acceleration program called Startup Bootcamp. And that was where everything changed for us. Because we were no longer three guys in a room in Berlin trying to figure things out. We were surrounded by hundreds of mentors, hundreds of finance experts, marketing experts, product experts, engineering experts, and we were forced, literally forced, to talk about our idea and pitch our idea 10 times a day, every week to another group of investors, every week to another group of journalists, and that's a really scary thing. It's a really, really scary thing, but it forced us to iterate constantly, every day, almost every hour, on adjusting our idea and figuring out how to communicate our idea, and then figure out how to bring that idea to market. So we stopped selling a cloud platform, and we started selling an enabling tool to use our cloud platform. The vision remained the same. And I think then the advice, though, I would give is go out and talk about your idea as much as possible if you're a startup. Go out and challenge yourself to see if people understand what you're doing. And talk to as many people as possible. Get help. Don't be afraid to get help. And take risks and think very big. Don't think small. Think very big if you can. As big as possible. And constantly get feedback from all different types of experts.
I think that's what helped us the most.
This idea of talking about your idea is something we've heard all day the last 3 days. It is such an important point. And we are going to give some startups later in the day the chance to talk about their ideas, and we're going to ask you, the audience, to listen, to give them feedback, to ask questions, to help them in this process that you've described. Jackson Bond, thank you so much for being with us.
Very welcome.
relayr,
Thank you.
One of our Code N15 winners. It's a pleasure to see how well things have worked out for you. Best of luck in the future.